Thank you, Chair, and all protocols maintained. I appreciate the opportunity to share our experiences from Bangladesh and from ActionAid. Um, uh, you are aware of how Bangladesh is known for being disaster prone, and therefore a lot of interventions, programmings have always been around coping with disasters when working with communities. So I don't know how many of you are aware of ActionAid. ActionAid is a global movement working with over 15 million people in 47 countries. Now, for ActionAid, the motto is to ensure a poverty-free, uh, equal, just, and sustainable world. And we are a development organization with a human rights-based approach. And for Bangladesh, we work with empowerment, solidarity, and campaign. And when I became the country director of ActionAid in 2007, my first 6 months were spent in trying to deal from one disaster to another. And that led to a realization that whatever interventions we are considering or doing and investing is not going to sustain unless we fully try and understand how to build back better. And we, being a disaster prone and a climate vulnerable country, this had to be prioritized. So ActionAid prioritized this. And in 2008, there was Cyclone Cedo. So that led to a greater understanding of, in terms of approach. And we took a holistic view of trying to address disaster, conflict, climate change. And when we started working in the ground, our approach is to work with the community. It is a highly participatory process and listen to those most impacted. And of course, among them were the young people and the women. And our approach was to try and find solutions together. I just want to share a story with you that we have lots of disaster shelters, and usually multi-purpose shelters, which are schools converted into disaster shelters during any disaster, whether it's floods, cyclones, waterlogging. When I started working, it became clear to me that every year there is either cyclone or floods, and then the people have to move. They are being displaced, even though temporarily, and then they have to go back and reconstruct their homes. And I kind of felt that the construction processes or the materials we were using and how we were approaching this was inadequate. And we would see the people again the following year out of their homes, living on embankments, highly vulnerable. So one example, one contribution that ActionAid made was that we want to develop shelters that are relevant and that will ensure that the community, the women, the children don't have to go back to the embankments. The reason I refer to this is that we created these individual shelters, that we worked with engineers, we worked with the communities. And the best part of it is, since 2008, after these shelters were handed over, none of those families had to go back to the embankment or look for shelter or ask for support. They have become self-sufficient. So this is our approach, and we applied this across the organization. Next slide, please. So we have been trying to understand climate change, did a lot of work on adaptation, and then trying to raise awareness on mitigation. We influence policy because for us it's quite clear that short-term response is there, but medium and long-term recoveries are not fully understood, and there needs to be more research. And we cannot do this work without participation and ownership of the community. So our approach is to promote women leaders. They were looking at, with the intention of equality and sustainability, trying to break the patriarchy and barriers, and understanding the underlying causes of women's participation. And it has been rewarded. If we move to the next slide, we got recognition both at the UN. Next slide, please. At the UNISDR for women-led community resilience work. We were at GPDR. Next slide. In 2017, 15, and 17, again being recognized for the work that is being done with the community. Next slide. And then it was very clear that we work with young people. their leadership, maximize the demographic dividend that Bangladesh has, and look at ideas from young people. Because I've given 10 minutes, I'm going to really fast track. We have spent more than 2 billion on disaster response as Bangladesh, and therefore we want to find sustainable solutions. We're looking at rational use of natural resources. Next slide. And community managed mechanisms for local-led adaptation. We are promoting practices of climate resilient, sustainable agriculture and nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based adaptation. We have also tried to link the community with the market, with the business and the private sector, because in the long run, nobody is safe unless all are safe. And if the community understands, it's important for the private sector and businesses to understand that their business as usual approach will not ensure that their businesses and their market linkages or profit-making processes will sustain. Next slide. So as I was saying that the next one. Yeah. So connect the market for fair price and improve competitiveness by working with the women and the community, promote saline and drought tolerant crop because of climate change, cultivation, the weather pattern, the salinity in the soil. All this has impacted the community and their food security. There's been issues of water security. The water stress is very high. I've just come back from our 8th International Water Conference, which is a flagship program of ActionAid Bangladesh. It looks at the rivers, rights of the rivers. We did a lot of policy advocacy and legislative advocacy. In 2019, we got the High Court judgment that rivers are entities, a living entity, and we need to respect and work around that. Engineering solutions go up to a certain extent, but it has to be relevant and with indigenous understanding and community participation. So the whole approach of ActionAid is a holistic approach with the idea that we not only do immediate and short-term response, but also look at the longer-term interventions. And this is why, while we were responding to disaster, that's why ActionAid came to Bangladesh after a cyclone in 1983. We're celebrating our 40 years, but this journey of 40 years has taught us a lot. We have learned a lot together with the community, but also with the disaster, the policymakers. We were influencing the Policy Disaster Act. We're pleased to say that now we have a renewed act. We have also got the disaster displacement related policy and action, the National Adaptation Plan, the climate strategy, the Bangladesh Trust Fund. This have all, if you trace it, can be traced back to the civil society and the people's movement and participation and engagement with the policymakers. Last slide, we have been working with the Rohingya refugees who, because of the exodus from Myanmar, are living in Bangladesh. Next slide. And there's more than 1.2 million Rohingya refugees. The shelters, the infrastructure, I've already mentioned about the shelters in Bangladesh, but also in the Rohingya camps, which is vulnerable to climate change, and there are issues of water, sustainability. Our physical infrastructure was made with community participation, and we won the Aga Khan Architectural Award 2022 for inclusive infrastructure. Women leadership, youth leadership, participation, and knowledge sharing, as well as influencing policymakers, whether it is about loss and damage, whether it is about coming up with alternatives. That has been the journey of ActionAid Bangladesh, and all those we work with, our partners and the communities. Thank you for letting me share my experience. I'm open to questions.